Good morning, everyone. Justice Brunner, you think we're ready to go here?
I think so. Good morning, everyone. I think I don't see any more. I know there are some more people who are going to be here. I just don't think they're here yet.
Okay, do you want to wait a few minutes?
Let's wait about a minute and a half.
Okay.
Thank you. My mom is sometimes challenged on Zoom, so that might be a little bit of the delay.
It's great she's able to join.
Okay, well, why don't we go ahead and get started, Chris?
Okay. All right, great. Good morning again to everybody. Thanks for joining. We appreciate you taking the time to connect with us here today. I'm going to turn it over to Justice Brunner. And as we said in the media advisory, she's going to be making an announcement here today about her future plans in public service. I think there's a couple folks that she wanted to introduce. Hopefully one of them will be her mom if she's able to get on. But my name's Chris Davey. I'm going to be helping Justice Brunner out with her campaign. You have my email address in the materials that we sent you, and I just want to invite you to reach out anytime if I can help you. If you have follow-ups to today's announcement or as this campaign proceeds. And I know you all would be interested to know what campaign is it that you're referring to, Chris? And Justice Brunner is going to share that with you and her exciting vision moving forward. So I'll just turn it over to Justice Brunner.
Thank you, Chris. Go ahead.
Oh, and I'm sorry. I wanted to say we'll be happy to, of course, answer any questions you might have as we conclude here. We have about, I would say, maybe 20, 25 minutes to spend with you here today. So happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Chris. I do want to acknowledge that my husband, Rick Brunner, and my daughter, Laura Kamara, are on, and I know other members of my family may be trying to, but if any of you participated in my investiture ceremony, you know how it goes sometimes with Zoom. So I'm so pleased that you took the time to be here this morning. I'm announcing that I'm running for Chief Justice of the Supreme Court next year, and I'm very excited about that prospect. I have found that being a justice on the Supreme Court is coming at a perfect time in the years of my experience as I gather my strengths and my knowledge and my information and empathy that I have gained from serving as a trial court judge in the Common Pleas Court in Franklin County, starting the adult felony drug court known as the TIES program, Treatment is Essential to Success, as well as my time as Ohio Secretary of State, administering a statewide agency, managing and supervising the activities of 88 county boards of elections in every county of this state. And after that, serving as a rule of law expert in Serbia, observing elections in Egypt, and teaching at the Bar Association in Sri Lanka, and then serving 6 years on the Court of Appeals in Franklin County, which had statewide reach as far as administrative agencies and their appeals, and then running for and beginning to serve on the Ohio Supreme Court. Some people would say, why Chief Justice? And The reason being that it is a platform to do even more than what I can do now. The Chief Justice is a critical person on that 7-member court in managing the activities of the other justices, promoting collegiality, and sort of setting a course for the direction administratively of the court. And while that might sound not that interesting to some people, you think about the task forces that the court can initiate and bring in not just members of the legal community, but and other judges from around the state, but members of the public, so that even right now, the court's working on things like a task force on conviction integrity and post-conviction review. When we talk about equality in the criminal justice system, you might think, oh, post-conviction review, what is that? Well, that's when a person is out of appeals, but they discover that there was evidence that was withheld in a trial for various serious charges, or where they have the chance to once more prove their innocence. And when we have the death penalty in Ohio, it's a very serious matter if someone was not fairly convicted of the crimes with which they were charged. The Chief Justice of the court is not there as an ideologue to try to advocate for one person to win and one person to lose, but to ensure that the confidence of the public is in a fair judiciary. And I believe very strongly in a very bright line between the separation of powers of the courts. And that also means using the power of the court when it's necessary and called for, and not falling back and saying, well, this should be for the legislature to decide, when actually it may be squarely in front of us. When you look at the courts around the state, one of the wonders of Ohio is that we are a very home rule state. That allows for honoring wide diversity among the many communities, urban and rural and mid-sized communities in Ohio. But my mom just got here. But it also allows for us to sort of gently keep people moving and judges moving together forward on the same track with the same goals in mind. And with the experience that I have, I think that I can add something to this court for the state of Ohio. And we've been through pretty tough times, and I think this is a time when it's important for me to step up. I didn't intend to run for Chief Justice when I ran for Justice of the Supreme Court. That was not some kind of an end goal for me. But I can see from the work that I'm so impressed with that Chief Justice O'Connor has done over more than, I guess we're looking at 2 terms as Chief Justice. And before that, there's a square launching point to move forward in positive directions, because we've already undertaken bail reform. She's been squarely in the spot where she said, this is not going to be, jail is not going to be a debtor's prison. And she's encouraged the courts of the state to look at a person's economic and social situation in life to determine whether or not fines are actually warranted, and what impact that has on a person being able to return to being a contributing member of society. So I'm just very pleased that I have the opportunity to do this, that I have the support of my family in doing this, and I would be more than happy to take questions from you at this point. And I think I'm going to need, all right, Chris, how do I do this? If I'm going to have to unmute people. Can they unmute themselves? If they want to ask a question.
Yeah, they should be able to unmute themselves. I'm looking in that we can look at the chat here as well. And
Shane, I will ask you to unmute. Let's see.
Can you hear me?
There you go.
I wanted to ask, the legislature right now is planning on moving forward with legislation that would require party affiliation to appear on the general election ballot. I wanted to see your thoughts on that and how that might affect your campaign for Chief Justice.
When I served as Secretary of State, there was the same proposal that was actually put forth by Democrats. They took it to federal court, and Justice DeLotte in the federal district court based in Cincinnati said that it's not unconstitutional to have the system that we have now, where candidates for judge or justice run in a partisan primary, but then are on the ballot in the general election in a nonpartisan fashion without a party affiliation. Now the tables are turned. And frankly, my opinion is just tell me the rules and I'll run. It's fine. They can do what they want. They're the legislature. It's their position to determine policy. Quite frankly, I think that the voters have benefited from not having to view justices or judges in terms of, oh, are they a Republican or are they a Democrat? And they can, because I know myself, in the past, because I know a lot of judges in the state, I haven't always voted a straight party ticket on judges. But if this is what the legislature wants to do, so be it. We'll deal with it. And I think, Andy, I think I unmuted you, and Laura, I'll get you in a second here.
Okay, thank you. And I don't want to skip the line. I'll ask a question, but I think there are other people before me who also requested, Dave Skolnick and Laura Hancock. Just wanted to point that out. So Justice Brunner, what do you think, how would an Ohio Supreme Court look different than what we've seen in the past with you as Chief Justice?
Thank you, Andy. Great question. First of all, I think that the court would be open to taking more cases. It's not exactly like a court of appeals where we engage in error correction. And so what we have to look at are issues that are of great public importance that we think that the public and also the courts would like to have resolved in the interest of eliminating confusion and settling issues of law. I had noticed when I was running for justice of the Supreme Court that the number of cases that the court actually took had decreased in 2019 to 6% of all the appeals that were filed, as far as being jurisdictional appeals where the court had to decide whether it took jurisdiction or not. That's gone up just a little bit. And I know since I've been on the court working with some of the other justices, we are taking more cases, and I'm really pleased to see that. We may sometimes get a case that once we get it, we think now that we've really looked at it and we've looked at the record, this is probably not one that we should have taken. But I would rather err on the side of letting people have their day in court. I also think that we're going to be in a position. Look, the death of George Floyd happened in 2020 while we were in a pandemic, while we were super focused on what we could get from the outside world in terms of media. And I saw that for myself as an opportunity to give real meaning to the work of making sure that there's racial fairness and equity in the criminal justice system, and that we can look squarely at these cases and delve below the layers and see whether or not there may be systemic racism that's baked into some of the practices that we use and what we do. The court has rules of procedure. We've got great attorneys working on many of those rules committees, and we can use their help to bring people together and say, how can we do this better, and how can we set the course for the future where we are not continuing to use old methods of thinking that actually incorporate racism.
Okay, I think Laura Hancock would be up next, Justice Brunner. Laura,
I think I asked everybody to unmute themselves, so I think they're able to do that. So Chris, you go ahead and call on who you want to call on.
Okay, great. Laura Hancock, do you have a question?
Yeah, Justice Brunner, just kind of following up on that. Maureen O'Connor had taken it upon herself. She's big into access to justice. And I was just wondering, do you have any ideas of, I don't know, going more beyond that, or is there anything that she's done that you disagree with, or, can you talk a little bit about some ideas you might have? And then also, what do you think about this idea of a criminal sentencing database? Do you support that?
I'll take your second part first. I heartily support the criminal sentencing database. When I was a trial judge, beginning in the year 2000, which is more than 20 years ago, I kept my own data sometimes I had to argue with my secretary about why we needed to do this, but I wanted to look at how I was doing to check myself to make sure that I didn't show any proclivity to be tougher on somebody because of some demographic characteristic. And, when I was Secretary of State, we created a database called Better Lives, Better Ohio. And the purpose of that was to give Ohioans access to data about everything having to do with our quality of life in Ohio. Unfortunately, my successors didn't see fit to keep that, even though the Secretary of State was the chief record keeper for the state of Ohio, and it did fit within what the Secretary was required to do. So it's a natural thing for us to keep a database and to be fearless in holding ourselves accountable to letting the public see just what we do. Every day as a judge, whether you're a trial judge, you're a Court of Appeals judge, or a Supreme Court justice, you cannot let your own personal issues get in the way. You've got to think about, there's that person in front of me whose case matters immensely to them. And in that position, I have to be at my best every single second. And we're never perfect, but at least if we have data, we can see where we've fallen short, and we can make sure that we don't fall short again. And we can do that as a judicial system. And I look forward to working with the judges who are already engaged in this project to help move it forward and make it effective for the courts of the state. Now, going to access to justice, that applies not just in the criminal aspect, but also on the civil side. Right now, our legal aids are have been so heavily underfunded that they can't always take people who even qualify for their services. I know that the governor is moving heavily to put adequate funding in the budget for that, but it's something that in the past, as an appellate judge, when legal aid brings a case to, at least when I was on the 10th district, they make sure it's a case that is a very strong case, and they do a very good job in representing their clients. But there are so many more people in need, and there are also people in the middle class who are faced with a legal system that, when they're keeping things balanced and trying to do the best that they can for their kids, they're not getting enough access to legal services. And that access to justice gives us so many things to build on what the Chief Justice is already doing and has done.
Okay, next up we have Laura Bischoff. Laura, you there?
I'm here.
Hi, Laura.
Hey, Justice. So, yeah, Hancock kind of asked my question, but another question I had is, it looks like 3 current members of the court, Sharon Kennedy, Pat DeWine, and yourself, are all running or interested in running for Chief Justice. How's that going to work in the next 18 months in terms of working side by side with folks if you're all competing for the same position?
I'm prepared to make it work. Now, at the current time, we are still virtual, and hopefully we will be able to be in person soon. I've not actually sat side by side with anybody because of Zoom and the pandemic. But, as I see it, all of us have been involved in elective office for a long time. We're all adults, we're all professionals, and my sense is that we're all doing what each of us thinks in our own way is best for the court by stepping up to run. And so, regardless, we should keep our eyes focused on the road ahead. And I, for one, do not intend to let the fact that I would be running for leadership of the court get in the way of good judgment and collegiality with my colleagues.
Okay.
Thank you.
Shane Stegmiller, did you still have a question for the justice?
No, I don't.
Okay.
Thanks, Chris.
Chris, I do.
Okay, David, go ahead. Thanks.
Jennifer, you've been a justice for 5 months, and you just acknowledged it's all been virtual. So how can you understand the job of what a Chief Justice does after such a short period of time on the Supreme Court? And secondly, This would allow you to serve only one term as Chief Justice should you win because of age, and then permit Governor DeWine to appoint your successor if he moves fast enough, even if he lost re-election. So how does that help Democrats, or at least those with a similar philosophy of yours on the bench, make headway in the Supreme Court?
Okay, I'll go to the first part of your question. There has been a very thorough onboarding process with the court, and I give credit to Chief Justice O'Connor for that. I actually, because I live in Columbus, go to the Supreme Court for oral arguments, and have had a lot of contact with the staff who are there already. I have sat by assignment on the Supreme Court, and I've served at all three levels of the courts. So I'm not concerned about the experience, because in addition to sitting at all three levels, I was a very close participant with the Supreme Court in actually documenting how to start a drug court back when I was a trial court judge. So I really don't have a lot of concerns about that. And I also like to consider myself always open to learning, and not concerned whether it's learning from someone who's showing me how to get into the building, or another justice who may say, hey, you need to do this or you don't need to do that. And I think when anybody's in any position, if they stop learning, it's not a good thing. So as far as the political aspect of that, personally, if I stayed where I am, and I'm obviously, if I lose, I still stay where I am. But if I stayed where I am, I would be eligible to run for a second term. That could make me really old when I left the court. But I look at running for chief as doing something out of a sense of duty, because I care very, very deeply about the courts, about the role of the judiciary, and the work that I did overseas in struggling democracies, whether it was Egypt or a former non-aligned communist country like Serbia, or a country that had just been through a civil war like Sri Lanka. I understand that the role of the judiciary is the real tip of the sword in rooting out and eliminating corruption. And I'm not going to get into that as far as Ohio goes, but I'm just saying that the court is so important. And I remember in Serbia, one of the questions that they asked me when I was speaking to reporters about a new campaign finance system that they were implementing in Serbia, where they actually observed what the political parties and the coalitions did instead of how much they spent. And they said to me, tell us about corruption in your state, because Ohio has more people than Serbia. And I said, well, I told them about Cuyahoga County in the late 2008 and beyond. And they said, oh, you're as bad as we are. And I said, no, but we prosecute. And it's the judicial system that helps hold people accountable when all is said and done. And so I care very much about ensuring that we have that safety net for the people, the communities, the organizations of this state. And as far as your political party considerations, if we want to do the strategy here, if in the primary, if there's a primary between Justice DeWine and Justice Kennedy, if Justice Kennedy were to win, there would be, and win in the general, there would be an appointment for the governor regardless. If Justice DeWine wins and he were to win ultimately, we still stay where we are, because I go back to my seat. He runs for a new seat, and he's actually vacating his seat if he runs in the primary election. So it's, in terms of, it's all up in the air.
Yeah, and if I could just interject, Justice Brunner, if I understood your preamble to the question, David, there was a comment to the effect that there would be a gubernatorial appointment for the Chief Justiceship upon the conclusion of this next term, with Chief Justice Brunner being term limited. And of course, that's not the case, right? Because
No, there would be an appointment for her vacant seat for an unexpired term.
Yeah, understood.
But there would be for Justice Kennedy if it were the two of us in the general election. If it were myself and Justice DeWine in the general election, if I were to win, yes, there would be an appointment. If he were to win, we basically the spots would be filled.
Yeah, but the difference is that I believe that a gubernatorial term runs out like 10 or 11 days after what your term would be once you took over as Chief Justice. So that would give a Republican governor an opportunity to appoint a Republican to that seat.
Correct.
So whether it be yours or whether it be Kennedy's, it would still be a Republican.
That is correct, assuming that Governor DeWine, yes, that is correct, because it would be before the end of his term. The other factor that none of us can predict is who's going to step up and run against Justice Fisher and against Justice DeWine, or if he runs in a primary for his seat. And so I think it's really a tough question to predict, but I step up anyways because, first of all, this is not something that I do because I'm a Democrat. This is something I do because I'm a judge, because I love the law, I love justice, and I love public service. And I know that if I can do what I do now, but in an expanded platform as Chief Justice, there is a lot of good I can do for that period of time in Ohio that I am given the privilege to do public service to make people's lives better. And I will do everything within my power to do that.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks for the question, David. I don't see any further questions in the chat. So, and we're right up upon 8:30, which is when
I did have one, Jeff Reddick from ABC6.
Okay, go ahead, Jeff.
Thanks. I have a baby on my lap, so he might interject too. Just quickly, Justice Brunner, obviously, you said you don't do it because you're a Democrat. You are a Democrat, however, and the state hasn't elected a Democrat Chief Justice since something like 1980. Other than a brief appointment by Governor Strickland, it's been Republican controlled since then. So what gives you hope in a state like Ohio that performs like Ohio in statewide elections outside of yours that you can win?
I have a long record of public service, and I looked at my election results last year and I gained 2.6 million votes, or 2.69 million votes. Barack Obama in 2012 had 2.8 million. Sherrod Brown for Senate had 2.7 million. This is something that I can do, whether there's a D next to my name on the ballot or not, because I care about the people of Ohio. I love my state, and I value and understand what public service can do in the interest of bettering the lives of ordinary people in Ohio and making the state work together. So I think the important thing will be for me to communicate that, to show specific plans that I have that will let people actually get a vision in their mind of what kind of a Chief Justice I would be, and then we'll let the chips fall where they may.
Okay, great. Well, thank you again, everyone, for joining us today. We're at time. Appreciate the questions. And again, if there's follow-up, you can reach me in the email address that we provided in the media advisory. We'll be sending out a media release with some further background information, so you can look for that. And hope everybody has a good day.
Thanks, everybody. Take care.